We don't really even consider ourselves technically an internet service provider. We are a broadband applications delivery company.
Welcome to episode 208 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm Lisa Gonzalez. In this episode, Chris visits with John Brown, president of CityLink Telecommunications. Chris and John have a rich and detailed discussion that reveals the entrepreneur's roots, his philosophy behind public-private collaboration, and they even discuss the pros and cons of the Internet of Things. This conversation runs a little longer than our usual podcast. We want to satisfy those of you who've contacted us and asked for more detail on these kinds of issues. Learn more about the company, located in Albuquerque at citylinkfiber.com. Now here are Chris and John Brown, president of CityLink Telecommunications.
Welcome to another edition of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Chris Mitchell, and today I'm speaking with John Brown, the president of CityLink Telecommunications in Albuquerque. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here, Chris.
Well, I'm excited to have you on the show. I've known you for many years as you've been building fiber networks, and certainly I think trying to build more than you've been able to, something we'll be getting into. But let's start off by just a brief description of what is CityLink, what separates it from other telecommunications companies.
Certainly. So CityLink Telecommunications is a locally owned company here in Albuquerque that is the only provider of open access dark fiber and telecommunications related services in the Albuquerque market. And we're also one of the very first, the first, provider to bring full gigabit internet fiber to the house, where we actually bring a fiber cable all the way up to the person's home and deliver symmetrical, upload and download speeds being the same gigabit service. And our first home was connected in 2008. And we've been, continuing to grow. We're a self-funded company, mostly funded out of cash flow, and profitable, and having a lot of fun.
Well, and one of the things that I think of when I think of you is someone who's really dedicated to the future of the internet. There's people who are getting in this business, who are starting ISPs, many of them more recently, I think, who are just trying to figure out how to become millionaires or billionaires. What is your background that makes you so passionate about some of the connectivity?
If I go way, way back, almost like Mr. Peabody, I got on the internet when I was in high school in the early mid-'80s, and I was blessed by being able to do that through an account with the University of New Mexico. They were allowing us high school kids to get onto their big, huge super mainframes, which was then connected to, effectively at that time, what we called the DARPANET, ARPANET network. And that was way, way cool. And it's been sort of, a love of mine ever since, being able to watch people communicate and interconnect across the globe and see this thing grow. And then I had the opportunity to live in Silicon Valley for 10 years and work with some of the companies that actually built the equipment that runs the infrastructure. And, the possibilities are becoming more and more endless as broadband becomes more ubiquitously available throughout the world. I also was one of the folks that was around with ICANN early on, was the primary technical person that ran one of the 13 root DNS servers, the LRoot DNS server for ICANN, for about 3 or so years. And that also really opened up my opportunities and eyes to see what could happen with the internet across the world. I mean, there were times where I had some fairly healthy debates with a very, very smart gentleman named Vint Cerf, and we discussed things like peering and open access policies and various other things. That a lot of that I've taken to heart in what we do with CityLink today.
Well, when you mention open access, that's actually something I really wanted to get into, because as a private ISP doing open access, you're in kind of an elite company. I was thinking that you might be able to fit all of the privately owned open access networks into a taxi, all of the owners of those networks. So tell me a little bit about how open access works on your network.
We look at the network at a couple of different levels. In many cases, sort of almost mirroring the ubiquitous ISO, OSI rather, I should say, 7-layer stack model of how the network works. And at one level, we have the physical infrastructure plant, the dark fiber out there, and we make our dark fiber available to anybody. The traditional carriers and many of our competitors today, to get access to even that dark fiber is either an extremely expensive proposition or it's just not available unless you happen to be a CLEC, competitive local exchange carrier, and then you may have access to some strands of dark fiber if the incumbent carrier, wishes and allows you to do it, or you are able to sort of threaten them legally enough to get it done. When we were building this company, we said we wanted to be able to allow enterprise, small business, large business, we didn't care. We wanted to be able to allow them direct access to dark fiber because it gives them better control over their business and gives them better control over their destiny and costs and all of those various bits and pieces that ultimately I hope keeps that business doing business in our city or in our community. And then when you move up the level, you get out of the dark fiber, we also provide open access Ethernet connectivity. So we'll sell an Ethernet pipe to anybody at effectively the same price point. We don't play games with the prices depending on if you're a big company or a little company. And then above that, we sell internet access both at a wholesale basis to other ISPs and at a retail basis to end users. And if you look at our franchise agreement with the city, when we were negotiating that with the city, some of the terms that we put out to the city that we wanted to have in our legal agreement with the city was that it is the normal and ordinary course of business that CityLink will provide open access dark fiber on a neutral and competitive priced basis. And those were very key and important words to us because neutral, competitive, non-discriminatory basis, meaning that we would not sell to customer A fiber at $100 a month, and then the other guy the same exact length or distance or whatever of fiber for $10 a month. We're going to be on parity with everyone gets the same equal treatment, same equal price.
One of the things that I really liked about that was that it's in the franchise. So if for some reason you decided to sell your business or others, took it over in some way, then that would still apply to the future of that network.
Exactly correct. That's actually one of the things that I, believe it or not, I learned out of my relationships with ICANN was this whole concept of the concern about capture of an entity. And so one of my concerns was, hey, we could go build and have me as the business owner and leader pushing these open access policies, but let's say down the road either I got hit by a bus, well, in this case I got hit by a backhoe because that's what would kill the fiber, right? Or I decided to sell the business, or let's say bad economic times fell upon us and we had to liquidate out for some reason. In any of those situations, what I believed to be fundamental open access terms and conditions were encapsulated in the legal agreement with the city who owns the right of way. So no matter what happened to our organization, whether we sold it or we fell upon bad times or whatever, those terms and conditions would still have to survive to the next entity.
Well, let's talk a little bit about who your customers are. You said you have some residential customers, and I'm sure you have some business customers. You just kind of build out to anyone who's interested, or is there a rhyme or a reason to how you're expanding?
So we have residential, commercial, end-user, retail-type customers, and we have municipal customers, and we have carriers. So we actually provide dark fiber to other well-known carriers that, were I to rattle their names off, everybody would be like, oh, yeah, I know who they are.
Right.
So, we're the internet service provider to the city of Albuquerque. We just won a competitive bid to do effectively another 5-year gigabit service for the city.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's much more my team than it is just me. Our fiber to the home, we've done everything. We've done active Ethernet, we've done GPON, and now we're back to active Ethernet. And so we've played with a lot of different technologies. But one of the core things about all of our bandwidth delivery is we always want to strive to hit the number that the customer is buying. So if they are buying a 50 megabit service, we want speedtest.net to show 50 megs up and 50 megs down or better.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those things that customers don't want to hear, oh, there's overhead or there's this or that. They want to know that they're getting what they're paying for.
Right, and part of the overhead that a lot of the other carriers have is overhead generated by PPPoE, which is what they're using from the old dial-up and DSL days for user authentication. And that takes up about 15% of the available bandwidth sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. I mean, that's one of the problems of kind of having these legacy systems for which they're always looking for just the cheapest way to increase their value a little bit without actually looking at the best engineering solution.
Yes. How can we integrate it into the back office that we already have, that we already know and love, and we don't have to change anything? We provide service from 10 meg all the way up to 10 gig, and we'll even provide 10 gig to a house. Our business is to provide a pipe. We don't really even consider ourselves technically an internet service provider. We are a broadband applications delivery company.
I think you just blew some people's minds, but it's a great distinction, and so let's be very clear about that. So an ISP would be someone who's delivering a service, which is connecting you to the internet, and maybe some DNS, some mail, some other things like that. But you're separating yourself out from that, right?
To us, the internet is an application. Our job is to provide the best pipe, the best IP transport pipe that we can to our customer. And so we look at things like Netflix. Netflix is an application. The internet itself, web surfing, is an application. Telephony or voice is an application. These are all different kinds of applications that are using this ubiquitous IPv4 or IPv6 transport network that we've built globally. And so we don't know what our customers want to do with this pipe. But we do know is that they want to be able to get to lots of different things. So we need to build a pipe that gets them the ability to get to lots of different things without any issues.
Right, and that's where I think, there's some carriers, and they would call themselves ISPs, certainly, who are looking to try and figure out how to nudge people and take a little bit off the top. If someone's going to go to Netflix, they want a piece of the action. But what you're saying is you're not interested in that. You just want to enable the end user to do whatever they want to do.
Right. Netflix knows how to run their business. Hulu knows how to run their business. All the video over-the-top guys, and in fact, all the application guys and gals, they know how to run their business. Our job is to connect our customer to that application or that set of applications and enable their access to that in a reliable and affordable method.
Well, sometimes I think they don't always understand exactly what they're doing. And you and I recently had a little exchange on the First Mile Institute listserv where we're talking about IoT, often called the Internet of Things, which I always joke is the insecurity of things. So what do you remember that anecdote? What specifically was happening that the customer wanted sort of an unshielded connection or a device that would not be protected in any way?
We were recently working with a fairly old building, 1960s, 1970s building that they wanted to upgrade and put in a energy management system to make the building a smart building. So they can control their HVAC and cooling, their electrical, their lights, all those various things, and have a much better control over where are they spending their money on energy consumption and where could they maybe improve it or possibly make sure they can bill their tenants tighter for it. And so they were putting in this equipment. It had Ethernet connections, and hey, that's pretty cool. We can plug it into the internet, and off we go. And they came to us and asked us for an internet connection, and I was perfectly happy to give them a connection. but I wanted them to explain to me what they were doing for protecting this infrastructure from the wild, wild west known as the internet.
Also known as Russia.
Or China. Or,
right. Script kiddies are everywhere. I just like to pick on Russia.
Or your backyard guy just down the street. Or even an unhappy employee that just recently got terminated. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that could cause potential threats or risk areas. And the answer that I originally got was that they really didn't need to do any firewalling, or we didn't have to worry about that because it wasn't like they were plugging in a Windows server or an internet server. They were plugging in this controller that was going to control the building. And I said, well, that's great. That's probably an embedded systems-based type controller. It has a little processor in it and all of that. We still need to really think about, the security surface area, threat surface area here. Long and short is that we had some dialogue back and forth, and at one point I wasn't really willing to provide them a connection because I was too worried that they were going to get hacked, and somehow we would end up getting to deal with that. And I didn't want to go down that road. We looked at the systems. We asked them what vendor equipment it was. Within a short period of time, I was able to come back and show them with that equipment various known hacks that were on the internet that would impact that equipment. We really had to work with them to help them understand that if you're going to plug it into the internet, you need to take full security, full threat analysis and take all of that seriously, because systems like this can materially impact a building and cause all kinds of problems and economic harm that maybe a energy management or lighting control company doesn't necessarily think about. It's just plug it in and it's magical because it's hooked up to the cloud.
Right. And the thing that I just find somewhat depressing is that this whole Internet of Things, all these devices are being made. None of I'm going to be perhaps a little bit broad, but I'm not embellishing by too much if I say that not a single one of these devices has been built with security in mind. Many of them are not flashable to be updated. And so effectively, every device that you're putting on your network right now that's sort of part of this IoT hype is a Trojan horse for someone to eventually take it over if they would like to. And I find that very scary, and I just wanted to make sure that people are, kind of aware of the threats currently and the need to embrace a better threat model for how we're treating our devices.
One of the things I've said to folks recently has been, for those of us that are parents, we teach our kids, the concept stranger danger. You don't want your 5-year-old walking up to somebody he or she doesn't know, and they need to be cautious of someone they don't know that might approach them. We teach a lot of stuff about physical security. We teach things about keeping our money safe in our pockets and having physical awareness. But what we're not doing right now is we're not teaching and bringing to the level of awareness our cybersecurity stance. We're not teaching people to be truly suspicious of that email that just came in that looks like it came from their CEO, and gosh darn, he really needs you to wire $18,000 right now. And it's just the little things that you can see in those emails that, the halfway trained eye sees and goes, oh, wait a minute, that's a bogus email. They're trying to scam me.
Right. Well, I want to make sure we have some time to talk about what's going on in Albuquerque. So I'm glad to hear that you are working with the city. I know that at one point you were struggling just to get a franchise. But I'm curious what your ideal model is in terms of how you would like to work with Albuquerque to basically everyone's benefit from your point of view.
Well, I think that whether it's Albuquerque or almost any other community across the country, I think we're at an evolutionary point where we need to better embrace, solid public-private partnerships. I believe that municipalities have very valuable things they can bring to the table to improve broadband and access so that we have internet access ubiquitously across our city. And the city has a lot of things that they can bring to the table to do that. And I think that private sector needs to start really looking at finding ways to work with the city and bring things to the table themselves that also looks to make the community better. One of the things I have concerns about is that a lot of businesses are looking at their return on investment and their economics in a very short-term window basis and sort of how much money can I quickly grab now? Mm-hmm. And I think that when you're in the fiber business and you're in the infrastructure business, you're not really looking at a 1-year or a 3-year return on investment. You're a utility. You're going to be there 10 years, 20 years from now, providing services. And so you should have the ability, or you should look at this return over a longer period of time and look at the larger picture of stuff.
What does that look like then in terms of how you would, because I mean, I'll tell you that when I hear the term public-private partnership, I immediately think of a couple of things. There's some great models out there, but there's also a lot of people who just throw that term around willy-nilly to mean anything.
You know, for example, for us, one of the great things that in projects that we have done is we'll be building fiber over to, let's say, one of the TV stations like we just recently did to get them connected. And we were basically a middle mile provider for another carrier. But while we were building that fiber, we architected that route so that it would go by one of the city's main fire stations. Then we were able to bring dark fiber into that fire station to help augment and provide additional connectivity to that fire station. We did not charge the city for that construction. You know, that cost us roughly $18,000 to hook up that fire station and just the direct lateral costs to do that.
Right.
In exchange, we didn't have any permit fees and we didn't have any permit hassles. And so we saved on time to market. We were able to save multiple weeks on getting to our retail, our commercial customer, because we were able to get rid of that potential burden that the city had control over.
Right, and it's interesting because I think it is that timing issue and the uncertainty that can it's a much bigger killer than the fees themselves often.
Right, the fees are not necessarily the big thing. The issue is how long is it going to take to process your permit application? And thankfully Albuquerque, on general, is pretty quick about getting permits in and out the door. But sometimes you run into roadblocks where you just have too many people asking for permits that week, and they get backlogged.
We had done a show a number of months ago, it could have been last year, about Santa Fe and the investment that they made in the carrier-neutral facility. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, Santa Fe came out with a really novel idea to build a fiber network to try to reduce the cost of broadband access in their community.
Well, I think if I understood it correctly, just for people who are listening and may not have heard that show, I think they specifically built like a fiber link to bypass a CenturyLink choke point. Is that a fair representation?
That's what they thought they were doing.
Okay.
And the devil is always in the details. What the city of Santa Fe wanted to do was they wanted to get from a particular location that connected to long-haul fiber, and they wanted to be able to get that into a building that they could control or have more or less open access with, and then also be able to cross-connect into the central office. And the thought process was that by doing so, they were going to be able to reduce their cost of getting access to things like DSL and other services. And I think the challenge is that they didn't understand completely the regulatory regime that CenturyLink, the incumbent carrier, operates under, and thus the access to that infrastructure, whether the city built it or not, still had to fall under the tariffs and the regulatory regime, and so those charges were still going to be there. The disappointing thing for us on that project was that we had bid on it, and the city ultimately awarded that to a carrier that had never put fiber in the ground at all. And they spent $1 million to build a mile and a half, I think. Maybe it was 2 miles worth of fiber. We had proposed a 7-mile project on the same dollar amount. The concern is that sometimes you get municipal folks that have a good idea, but they're actually not network or subject matter experts. And so they try to build something, and it doesn't necessarily truly solve the problem. I like to analogize it to what happened Indiana back in the 70s where they actually tried to legislate the value of pi.
Yeah.
Hey, let's make it 3. It doesn't need to be 3.141. Let's just make it 3. It's easier to do the math that way. Right. I don't think I want my arches and my geometry done with 3. I like 3.141.
You don't want to cross that bridge.
Nah. Pun intended.
Right.
I think that the model we have in Albuquerque is a model that is cookie cutterable. We have a proposal that we've put before the city over the last few years where we would take $2.5 million a year of their recurring telecom expense, hooking up 160, 170 buildings. We would take that recurring expense and erase it forever off of their balance sheet by putting in dark fiber to all these buildings.
Are those buildings are they leasing physical circuits from someone currently, and that's the cost you would get rid of?
Correct. They're currently leasing Metro Ethernet from various others to get to those buildings.
Sure. Very common.
So when they want faster connection to Fire Station 5, they get to pay more.
Right.
Whereas with the dark fiber, all they have to do is change out their own routers and equipment that they already are putting in anyway, and they could go from 1 gig to 10 gig to 40 gig to 100 gig, and the fiber stays the same.
Right, and not just that, but actually in talking with some of the people that have made that switch, for instance, in like school districts, there's a variety of other benefits. I mean, you can actually, you need fewer personnel often when you have full control of the network, because you can basically, you have a better sense, you have more visibility into all the points where something could go wrong. You're not waiting on hold with that person you're leasing it from while they run their system checks.
Correct. The dark fiber provider has a simple job. Does photons going in at point A come out at point B? And if the photons coming out at point B, the light coming out at point B is of the acceptable power levels, then the dark fiber provider's job is done.
Right. And then those are also in longer term contracts too. So you don't have to worry that in 2 years your Metro E connection is going to go up 50% or something like that. So it gives you, as a public institution, having that long term dark fiber contract, tremendous benefits.
The way we're pricing this, our deal to the city is really threefold. One is we're going to provide 24 strands of dark fiber exclusively for the city's internal use. The second part is that we would put a separate set of 12 strands for all pre-K through 12th grade accredited public or private educational facilities. So now, whether it's a public school or private school, as long as you're an accredited school, we'll bring you dark fiber, and you guys in the education world can figure out how to best use that and interconnect to make education better around here.
Right.
I know that for Albuquerque public schools, a number that was given to me a few years ago is that they spend almost $1.5 million a year on their infrastructure telecom costs, hooking their schools up with Metro E. So we would save the public schools at least $1.5 million a year off of their budget. The third was, as we were really rolling on this, is if we're going to make our community better. I know that one of the hospitals here spends over $300,000 a month. So what's that, $3.6 million a year?
Yeah.
Just connecting their major medical facilities together for telecom. And we have 3 or 4 different major healthcare providers in the market. So we were going to put another set of 12 strands just for healthcare. Now, we're not hooking up to the little sole proprietor doctor's office or dentist office. We're hooking up major medical facilities so that that MRI, that CAT scan, that X-ray, whatever, that imagery can be at a blink of an eye sent 40 miles across town to wherever that radiologist is to quickly look at a picture and go, nope, that spleen is about to bust. You need to roll that person into surgery now. So hopefully we increase quality of care and increase our rate of survival on emergency situations. The fourth thing that we were going to do is that we were going to put free Wi-Fi at every city park. All of these 4 items we're going to do, and all that we're looking to recoup is our out-of-pocket construction cost. Once we recoup that infrastructure cost, that construction cost, then the city, the schools, the healthcare, and the free Wi-Fi, they don't have another check to write ever again, forever and ever.
And that model works for you because that enables you to build a lot of that middle mile infrastructure that you're going to need to connect residents and businesses and that sort of thing, right?
I'm going to make my money off the private sector. I don't need to make my money off the governmental sector.
You're giving them the strands. It's not like you're just temporarily leasing them to them or something.
They will effectively get an IRU or an indefeasible right of use of those strands in perpetuity.
Right, and that's very... it's not something that's odd. That's a very well-known
Right.
legal concept.
And there's plenty of case law around the fact that says when you legally write that down and we all sign on it, that's very well defined. So it's nothing unique or special weird out there at all.
And so that's your proposal, and the city is considering it, hasn't really acted on it at this point.
Well, so a few years ago, the city said, well, how much would that cost? And we said, we figure it'll cost about $10 million to build out 100 plus miles here in the metro area. And the city said, well, we don't really have $10 million that we can pull out of our budget today. So if you can fund this and finance this up front, we can pay you back over time. Mm-hmm. And, sort of my response is, well, I wasn't really looking at being a bank.
Right. Well, this is, I have some sympathy for the people that you're dealing with because, in the government world, there's a holy line between capital expenditures and operating expenditures. And there's a lot of inefficiency because of that line, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. We went away and we thought about it. I don't take no as an answer usually. And I was able to meet a gentleman at an event in Washington, D.C., of all places, at a Freedom to Connect event. I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to hear that because I thought those Freedom to Connect events were terrific.
I was able to meet a gentleman there who had recently done a public-private partnership on a fiber project in his community. We got to know each other pretty well, and I was explaining to him this project, and he came back and said that he was willing to put the $10 million up at a 6% interest rate.
Nice.
And 5-year period of time. I went back to the city and said, hey, I got the money, so let's move. And I think the city was a little surprised that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, this gentleman and us met with the city, and everybody thought it was a really great idea. And this particular gentleman is financially well and easily capable of doing this project. And the city was able to vet him and just determine themselves that this was an easy financial thing for him to do should he decide to do it. And that was approximately 2 years ago. And we still don't have yes, no, or indifferent from the city. What the city has recently done is that they want to build fiber down Route 66. And at a semi-public meeting a week or so ago, the city came out and said that they've estimated what their cost is to build an open access fiber, but they haven't been able to define what open access really means, down Route 66. And they can do it for about $250,000 per mile. And I asked the question, what do you get for $250,000 per mile? Because just recently I put a mile of fiber in the ground in downtown central business district of Albuquerque, which is one of the harder places to do construction, all underground for less than $100,000.
Right, yeah.
And they couldn't answer that question. I see municipalities, they're trying to figure out ways to make their town, their city better, to attract new economic development, new businesses, and to attract keeping businesses there, and to make their place a better place to be. And I see a lot of the effort is sort of almost a flailing of they're not truly sure about how to go about doing this, so they're just like throwing things out and hoping something will stick and it'll sound good.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a challenge to figure out who's legitimate in this business and who isn't. Who do you listen to, who do you work with, and that sort of thing. It's hard for cities, and to some extent, I like to think that that's one of the roles that we try to help play is helping people to understand that.
Right. There are a lot of really good consultants and advisors out there, and then there's a lot of other advisors and consultants out there that have never had to eat their dog food.
And I'll just go one further and say that over the next year, there's going to be more and more of those ones.
Right. I mean, that's one of the things we tried to help with, like the city of Santa Fe, is to understand is we've been building fiber for 10 years. We've actually hooked up home customers. we've tried lots of different technologies, and we've got real life experience on the pluses and minuses, not only short term, but long term, and how operator friendly are they? How friendly are they 3 years later to come back and work on? That's a lot of the value that we've built internally over 10 years is we could talk a lot about pluses and minuses of a lot of different wonderful technologies that have come out.
Let me just say thank you so much for joining us on the show.
I appreciate it very much.
That was Chris and the president of CityLink Telecommunications, John Brown. You can access the transcript for this and other Community Broadband Bits podcasts at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter, where the handle is @muninetworks.org. Thank you to the group Forget the Whale for their song I Know Where You've Been, licensed through Creative Commons. And thank you for listening to episode 208 of the Community Broadband Bits podcast.